Hi there, and thank you for tuning in to The Social Circus, where every week we dive into a variety of topics covering social media, mindset, and how to run your business. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. Hello, my lovely listeners, and welcome to your weekly dose of The Social Circus. Today, we're diving into a topic that touches many lives but isn't openly discussed: endometriosis and menopause. And we have the perfect guest to shed light on this transformative phase. Meet Julie Farrelly, the founder of My Menopause Clinic. As a functional and integrative nurse practitioner, Julie brings a wealth of knowledge and personal experience to her practice. She understands firsthand the challenges many women face during menopause and is passionate about providing personalised holistic care to help them navigate this journey with confidence and vitality. Julie's approach goes beyond traditional methods, focusing on integrative strategies that address the unique needs of each woman. Her mission is to empower women to embrace this stage of life, offering support and guidance to ensure that we not only survive but thrive during menopause. Julie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. That was a lovely intro.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so excited to have you back. And I think I've mentioned to you on many occasions, because for all of my listeners, Julie is who I personally see to help me navigate hormones and life as I go through. I'm in perimenopause at the moment. But if you're interested in listening, Julie has been on my podcast previously. And if you'd like to listen to her episode, it's episode 127. And I said to Julie every time I see her, your episode is one of my most listened to and download episodes of my 150 plus episodes that the podcast has had. So I had to have you back to talk about all things really menopause and endometriosis. So I'm thrilled to have you here today, Julia. Sorry, I won't talk all the time.
No, that's fine. And I did listen to your previous podcast where you're talking about your story.
Yeah.
Her story. Was that the one just before?
Yes, it is. So I'm so happy that you listened to that, because I know that for all my listeners, March is Endometriosis Awareness Month, and I have been an endometriosis sufferer for all of my adult life, really. And it's been a really tough challenge. And I guess as I approached, like I turned 50 last year, I thought naively these things would go away and it would leave and it would be behind me. And it's been really tough managing active menopause and active endometriosis. And I wanted Julie to come on and talk a little bit about that, because again, I think it's something, even though I've suffered with this disease my whole life, it's not something I thought was going to be an ongoing problem. So Julie, let's talk a little bit about endometriosis, and I'd love you to give your medical spin. I did talk about what it is last week, but obviously I'm not a medical expert. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about what is endometriosis and what does it look like from a medical perspective?
Well, look, I think you did just a fabulous job. You've lived it, so you've got a whole lot more knowledge than a lot of the medical people, sadly. And as you expressed in that, and thank you for making me tear up too. I did have into what you've gone through. But yes, you did explain that, 1 in 10 or 1 in 9 women now suffered from endometriosis. It takes many years to get a diagnosis, even in this day and age. You talked about a blood test hopefully being coming out soon, which would be a big. But I remember, it just triggered a memory of mine we would have been around 15. A friend of mine just suffered so badly with her periods. I remember her lying on the floor, clutching a hot water bottle. And, and I just think now, I bet she had endo. She probably never found out for years and years, which is just awful. But yes, as you explained, the endometriotic tissue, like the lining of it, uterus, somehow, no one really knows, those cells can go outside of the uterus and land on either your uterus on the outside, your fallopian tube, your ovaries, bladder, all through your pelvis to some poor women. And I gather that's probably more your case there.
Yes. Yeah, I'm stage 4, so it's on organs outside of my reproductive organs is, I think, the medical definition. So, but it's, I think one of the hardest things about it, and I guess you would have seen this from treating patients, is there's no relationship between whether we're stage 1 or stage 4 and how much pain we live with. That's, I think, what makes it very difficult for medical practitioners to understand, is it can be incredibly painful even though you have minimal endo. And some people live with extensive endo and have very little pain. It's very unusual in that respect, isn't it?
Exactly. And as you're explaining as well, the estrogen, the time that the estrogen builds up, so around even in the middle of your cycle. Sometimes people get that pain. They feel that when they're ovulating, but also when your periods are due or when they come, that's when you get that dreadful pain because that tissue is reacting just like it would. And it's all throughout your body. I just can't imagine how crippling it would be. I know how bad it was just with normal period pain.
Yes, definitely. And I know that having been treated with you, so I imagine, and I guess I know better now, that when we get to perimenopause, our endometriosis will go away. And this is, as we know, you and I have had lots of conversations about it. This is not always the case, and it can persist on. And I guess that's not something that I was expecting. So why is that?
Another thing we'll just never know. I think, well, hopefully one day with science.
Yeah.
And the other thing that women are told is if they get pregnant, have babies, it'll go away. But
Yes.
clearly that doesn't happen either. So some women will end up with a hysterectomy by their own choice, and they might be told that will cure it. Some women actually do really well after hysterectomy, and we presume that they're the ones that really just had the tissue on the outside of the uterus, perhaps.
Yes.
And the fallopian tubes, because they usually take the tubes as well these days.
Yeah.
Do a hysterectomy and sometimes leave the ovaries away. So, but it seems like the women who have it stage 4, 3 or 4 can have the ongoing pain that just isn't cured from having a hysterectomy, sadly.
No, and I guess our issue is that even though we might be going through changes with our hormones, the endometriosis can remain in our abdomen and keep causing ongoing pain. And I think this was probably last year when this kind of realization came, having worked with you. I actually felt really sad that I thought this could be my journey forever. And I also have scar tissue and nerve damage, which will always be with me. And it's kind of disappointing because I feel like we've suffered enough, and it's like, is there no end in sight for this? And it's a really hard thing to manage, isn't it?
No, I can imagine. So, yes, with you, we did try estrogen, but sadly, it did like worked really well for a couple of months. But then, as they say, estrogen can flare or feed the embryonic tissue, but not always. So I do have another couple of women that have come to me, have had endometriosis in the past, now menopausal, they've had a hysterectomy. They say they don't have any pain. It did work for them. So for them, they have been able to have estrogen. It's worked really well. So it's a bit of a delicate balancing act.
It is.
Really try, I think, and see how it goes and try and balance. So it's not just estrogen. We've got to remember there's progesterone and testosterone as well. So if you're not coping with the estrogen, sometimes just progesterone and testosterone can just have so many benefits that we aren't taught about as well. Doctors are taught to give, especially if you've had a hysterectomy, doctors are taught you don't need progesterone. The reason we must have progesterone if you've still got a uterus and you're on estrogen is because that endometrial lining can grow and thicken and become can develop something called hyperplasia, which can lead on to cancerous cells. So that's why you must have the progesterone. But they're saying, well, you don't need it if you've had a hysterectomy. But progesterone has so many beneficial effects on its own for your brain, bones. It helps with bone build up or stopping of the breakdown of your bones. Mood is huge. We all need it.
Absolutely. That's one of my big triggers, actually. So I want to roll on and talk a little bit about menopause because I don't want to kind of focus just on for the few of us that have both active endo and going through menopause, because I think one of the really interesting things about working with you, Julie, has been your holistic approach to things. And I think for many women, we go to our GP and we just get given HRT. I think most people don't even know what's in HRT in terms of hormones. And working with you with the bioidentical and really finding the combination of hormones that is working for me has been huge. As you said, estrogen is not my friend, so we're not using that anymore. But I'm now taking, obviously, a combination of testosterone that has another hormone in it and progesterone. And before, I mean, you would think that someone with a condition that's hormone-based would understand hormones, but working with you and understanding what does the lack of those look like, and what does it look like when the things are going well, which is how I've been managing my dosage. Can you talk a little bit about, first of all, HRT and what's in there, and then the bioidentical and how they're different?
Yeah, so traditional HRT, sort of the ones that our mothers would have taken before that car crash of a study came out and everyone was taken off it. It was something called Premarin, which means pregnant mare's urine. So it was literally made, it still is made from pregnant mare's urine. Why is your and I? Yeah,
I didn't know that.
the urine. So it's conjugated equine estrogen. So there's actually a few estrogens in that. Still around. It did work, but it's not made for humans, obviously.
Yes.
And the other one that was used back then was, so there was something called Prem Pro, which is a combination of the Premarin with another synthetic progestogen. And the big scare about breast cancer from HRT came from that synthetic progesterone. So we just don't use that. Actually, I shouldn't say we don't. I don't, because it doesn't match the molecules that we make. So now HRT or bioidentical. Bioidentical means it's exactly the same as the molecules in our own bodies. So, if you put it under a microscope, it has the same chemical structure, I should say. So,
and why is that important? Like, is it mean that our body responds to it better, or what are the benefits of that?
So gynecologists and GPs will still prescribe the synthetic progestogens for conditions like heavy bleeding, terrible PMS, PMDD. Can work for some, just is a disaster for others, because it will lock into the receptors. So all of our hormones, they're chemical messengers that go around all of our body, into our brains, hearts, all of our organs, sending messages, and they need to lock onto receptors. If we have a synthetic molecule, so it's usually progesterone, that's the synthetic one, it doesn't quite match. It's got extra little bits out the sides, which is just so that they can patent it and sell it as a product. Whereas you can't sell a natural molecule. And sorry, got distracted then. So yes, going back to the bioidentical, they exactly match. So they lock in perfectly to our receptors, and then they go into the cells or the messages they leave with all the beautiful ongoing beneficial effects. And then they can talk to your bones and your brain and do all the right thing as well. Whereas the synthetic ones, they'll lock in and they might stop heavy bleeding. They might stop a few other symptoms, but that's practically it. They're just not giving those beneficial ongoing flowing effects. Yeah,
They're hugely different, aren't they? And so with the different hormones, in terms of, and I'm really happy to discuss my medical stuff. I should always say that because I know that I'm your patient. But in terms of the hormones, they're bioidentical, and like what do we take and how do we take them? Can you talk about, because I know you do so much investigation. Like we go to our GP and we say, I'm struggling, and they do a blood test and then they just give you drugs. And it feels very, I know I've had quite a few friends going through this prior to myself, and it feels like a sort of like a blunt instrument, whereas what you do feels like really treating what we're struggling with. So can you talk a little bit about the process of what are you looking for, and then how do you decide what hormones help with those?
I like that analogy of the blunt instruments. It's like picking up a hammer, because that's traditionally what doctors are taught. This is the drug for this condition. Or you go to a gynecologist who is a surgeon. So their job is to cut bits out and that solves the problem. Then they, leave you on the street pretty much and off you go. Whereas I look at what I use with all of the different hormones. They're all different tools we can use different, as we've had to do with you. It's all tweakable is what I like to say. So it can take a couple of months to really get people right on track. But the colleges, the Menopause Society and all the International Menopause Society say don't do blood tests or don't test hormones, specifically, because we just go by symptoms. And that is true in as far as you come to me for your first consult, I'm happy to prescribe straight up what you need based on your symptoms. But I will always give you a form, because everyone wants to know. They want to know what your hormone levels are doing. Yes, we might catch them, especially if you're in perimenopause when estrogen is really chaotic. Yeah, but you need to still go on by symptoms. So we might get your results back, go, oh, it looks like you've got plenty of estrogen, but the next month you've got all those awful PMS symptoms. It's just like, no, clearly it's up and down, and you might benefit from a little bit of estrogen as well as the progesterone and maybe testosterone.
Yeah, so taking testosterone's been quite interesting because it's not something that I think for many of us as women, we think we need. And I kind of, when we first discussed me going on testosterone, I was like, what does that mean? Like my husband immediately said, well, you have a higher sex drive. He's kind of excited by that. but really it has, you were talking a lot about how it has great impacts on many of the things that we struggle with during menopause and perimenopause. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think many of us have not been exposed to why we would need testosterone.
And no, and I think sadly it's the name testosterone. It's just only men have it, for their testes. But women actually produce more testosterone than we do the other hormones throughout our lives.
Yeah.
I know. And it will just sort of slide off gradually from, say, about our 30s. And by the time we hit menopause, it's, really reduced as well. So I always test testosterone as well with my hormones. Plus, so yeah, usually GP will only test the estrogen, maybe progesterone, and other hormones that come from your brain that can show that you're going through menopause. But I do the whole gamut, including testosterone, free testosterone, sex hormone binding globulin, big words, and DHEA, which is that other thing that you said is mixed
Yes.
with testosterone.
I couldn't remember what was in my other testosterone. I knew it had some acronyms in it. And so what is it likely to feel like having that low testosterone? Like what is that likely to, like what kind of symptoms will we likely be living with if we're in perimenopause or menopause and low testosterone on top of that?
Well, when you're probably feeling at your worst, and this is when the doctor will say, here, I'll just prescribe you a antidepressant. But you think, I'm not depressed. Maybe, I just feel like I'm not myself. All of your enthusiasm for what you used to enjoy just goes. So maybe you used to enjoy going to the gym a few times a week. Now it's just like, I just don't want to, can't be bothered, don't care. It might be like going out for lunch with your girlfriends or out for breakfast with your husband. It's just like, don't care. It's odd. They're symptoms that are very vague, but I hear them all the time. But the brain fog is a big one, and lack of word finding.
It's a brutal one, that one. And it's really interesting because you talk about that, and I've had some conversations with my husband about how I'm feeling inside of my mental health, and I've definitely experienced that lack of zest and the lack of wanting to do things that I've previously enjoyed and not being able to. I just thought I was having maybe a low patch, and you can kind of brush it off, and then you kind of go, this is actually not who I am, and I'm not feeling like myself, and it's really hard to articulate that. And I think if you were to say that to your doctor, like you say, the first thing they're going to do is give you an antidepressant. And I've certainly don't suffer with depression and didn't feel that, but I certainly didn't feel myself. And it's really noticeable when you can kind of see the words in front of you. But I think and I'm really hoping for my listeners, um, I think we imagine there are just X, Y, and Z as symptoms of menopause, and there are so many more that we're not aware of. And for me, the brain fog has been horrendous. It's much better now, but and it actually, and I think you sent me a podcast, and it was on that the British doctor. I actually had moments of wondering if I had early dementia because I was struggling so much, and I'm very high functioning. I have a really great business and I show up and can bring all my things. And I would have moments when I was coaching of just like, I can't find the word. And I actually recorded a video, like a tutorial on doing some software, which I would have done personally a couple of hundred times. And I had to pause it 4 times because I couldn't remember how to do something. And then I would remember, and then I would start the video again and I would forget. And I just thought, what's happening? Like, who is this? Like, it was actually quite frightening. That part of that felt quite scary because we were obviously at our age have older parents, and we're watching our parents decline and their memory. And I was like, good grief, my mum's 30 years older than me. I felt like my memory is worse than hers, and it's quite scary.
It is very frightening. And yeah, it's another common thing as well. I do have a symptom list that I send out to everyone before their appointment. It's an old-fashioned one. It's a bit brief, but I do have a much more comprehensive one that I'll send to people as well that goes through all of the hormones. That's signs of low estrogen, signs of high estrogen, signs of low, and we even go through thyroid is a big one as well. So going back to that holistic method that I use is because, and talking about the blood tests that I get, again, it's not just your hormones. I'll add in proper thyroid function tests, which your doctor won't do, B12 and folate. Vitamin D is massive in menopause. It's so important. But
And we would imagine we would think in Australia we're getting plenty of that.
you'd think so, but we've all been taught to slick, slop, slap, and don't get it. We're very low in vitamin D in Australia.
Wow.
I know, it's nuts. But yes, all of that as well. So hormones are in a real soup. So if your thyroid hormone's low, that can really contribute to low energy as well, and the weight gain that comes along as well. So if we optimize that, it's a bit of a watching a boat tossing and turning in the ocean.
Definitely feels like that. And I think for many of us as women, what obviously working with you over the past 12 months has really taught me is to really question how I'm feeling and to ask myself, is this how I normally feel? Because having that awareness is half the battle. Like, I remember when I first filled out your questionnaire and I was like, so is that a symptom now? Or maybe, so I'm not going insane. I'm not, I'm not turning into a nasty bitch with my family. Like, these are real things. And I think it's, even though it's, like you said, it does take a little while for things to improve, I think realizing that many of the symptoms that we experience are actually a part of the journey into menopause. I truly believe I didn't understand that 12 months ago. I thought all sorts of things were going on in my head, and a lot of blame on, oh, maybe I'm just tired, maybe I'm just this, and not realizing that there was something I could do about it. I think I really hope for my listeners, if you're in this stage and you're feeling those things, please know that so much of it's tied up in our hormones. I think most of us think menopause is we put on a little bit of weight, we get hot flushes, and our periods become erratic and then stop. And there's just so many more symptoms and so much associated with it. I don't think any of us realize that.
No, exactly. Mental, emotional, everything. And the sad thing too is it's happening younger and younger. I've got women in their early 40s, late 30s as well, needing hormone replacement because, well, we think it's environmental, but not really sure why it's happening earlier and earlier. Plus, there's the women with PCOS as well who have, their similar problems to endo, similar but different.
Yes. So there's lots going on. So for all of my lovely listeners, please go back and listen to episode 127 with Julie on it, because we talked a lot about menopause and symptoms and things like that. But Julie, you've kind of had an evolution and transformation in your business. So you've launched My Menopause Clinic, which I'm so excited to see you spearheading, because I feel like it's so needed. So can you talk a little bit about what it would be like to come and see you as a patient?
So if you go to my website, which is finally live, it's just literally mymenopauseclinic.com.au. There's a lot of information there. There's lots of blogs there that you can read through as well. But every link goes straight to my booking system. When you book in with me, you'll get that questionnaire to fill in, which could just be a bit enlightening for you as well. So feel free to type some notes in the booking as well. This is what I'm going through. This is what's happening. It just gives me a bit of a clue. But yes, our initial consultation, it's not, your typical short GP visit. At least 20 minutes long, depending on which one you select. If you've got more problems, if you're really worried about your weight gain and maybe you are hypothyroid, all of those issues, you can book a longer appointment so we can really spend that time talking through. As I said, I'm more than happy to start you on hormone replacement right from the get-go, but I'll always email you, because it's all telehealth. I should have said that as well. It's all over the phone, which is super easy. Then I'll email you a blood test form. You go, I often get those. You get your hormones from the pharmacy, and then we connect back on another call, at least within a couple of weeks to a month. And we talk through your blood results and pick up anything that we might have missed. And if you've started your hormones, you can just let me know how you're going, and then we just follow up every few months.
Amazing, amazing. And I have to say, I think what's really reassuring is that you are obviously a nurse practitioner, and we're covered under Medicare to come and visit you for anyone who's listening outside of Australia. I think you can still see Julie, but it's a different process, isn't it? Because it's a different medical system. So in Australia, Julie is a nurse practitioner covered under Medicare, and you can go see her through a telehealth online appointment, and fingers crossed the government keeps those telehealth, because they're so important for us. But I think what's been really important for me is having the continuity of care. So being able to speak to someone and get in touch with you when sort of things were going badly for me last year. I'm like, oh, I need to see you. I'm not doing well. That's really reassuring. And I think for many of us, we often feel quite judged by our GP. and we don't feel like we can have those really frank conversations that we can have with you. So I'm so appreciative of your help and support that you've given me. And I'm so grateful for you to come back on my podcast and share your wisdom, because I know that for many of the women who are in my audience, this is a problem that we suffer so extensively. So for everyone who's listening, in my show notes will be the link to how you can get in touch with Julie and work with her, but she's mentioned her website. Julie, thank you for coming on again today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And love talking to you. And for all my listeners, I hope you've enjoyed listening to Julie today. And I will catch you the same time next week on The Social Circus. Thanks so much for tuning in to The Social Circus. As your host, Sarah Thompson, I am thrilled that you've chosen to spend your time hanging out with me. I would be so grateful if you could spare an extra moment to go and leave me a review on your favourite podcasting platform. And if you even felt more excited, you could share my podcast with your friends who you think would get great value from it. Thanks so much again for tuning in.